Welcome, everyone. As you're joining us, please take a look at some of the photos that we have scrolling in the background. These are all pictures of Mesa Verde National Park, and they were taken by one of our board members, Todd Bacon. Please feel free to have a look while we're waiting for others to join us. We will start promptly at 4 o'clock. In the meantime, enjoy. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the photos. We are planning to start here in about 1 minute. If you would like to drop a line in the chat about where you're joining us from, we always love to hear where people are tuning in from. So go ahead and do that. I'm here in Denver, Colorado, and Sheldon is at the park today, Mesa Verde National Park, and Monica is joining us from Sedona, Arizona. So you can see just from the three of us, we have hundreds of miles between us, but we always love to hear where you're joining from. It looks like we have Camp Verde, Arizona, and another person from Sedona is joining us, Mike and Greeley. Thank you all for sharing. We're just gonna wait a couple more seconds. Right when it hits 4 o'clock, I'm going to pass it off to Monica Buckle. As you know, if you've joined us before, she is our wonderful, incredible host for all things webinar at Mesa Verde Foundation, and we are very lucky to have her. Okay, Monica, I'm going to pass it off to you. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Shannon, and good afternoon and happy fall. Thank you for joining the Mesa Verde Foundation. I serve on the Foundation's Board of Directors, and I'll be moderating today's event. We are honored to have Mesa Verde National Park archaeologist Sheldon Baker presenting. Sheldon will discuss the role of geospatial technologies in cultural resource management at the park, and how they assist the park in completing its responsibilities and informing management decisions based on the National Historic Preservation Act. The Mesa Verde Foundation is the official philanthropic nonprofit partner to Mesa Verde National Park. As a foundation, we secure funding for the park's capital improvements, special projects, and further promote understanding and preservation for ancestral Puebloan culture. I would like to thank the park superintendent, Casey Cook Collins, for her invaluable support. Our public programming is possible solely from donations and the support of Mesa Verde Foundation fellows and members like you. We thank you for creating space for this webinar offering. Now, circling back to our guest speaker. Sheldon has a connection to Mesa Verde since he visited the park as a young child. His experience at Mesa Verde led him to pursue anthropology and archaeology at Metropolitan State University of Denver. Before graduating, he began his career in archaeological fieldwork with the Chugach National Forest in Alaska and private sector cultural resource management firms in New Mexico, and participated in the Chocopuquio Archaeological Project in Cusco, Peru. Upon graduating with a Bachelor of Arts, Sheldon received his master's degree at the University of Pittsburgh. He wrote his master's thesis on inferring inequality and social heterogeneity through variation in Inca period domestic architecture. He also holds a graduate certificate in Geographic Information Systems from the University College at the University of Denver. Sheldon first worked at Mesa Verde as a crew member for several field seasons on the Long Mesa post-fire Archaeological Sites survey and the Spruce Tree House Archaeological Documentation Project. He also worked for the National Park Service as an archaeologist at Casa Grande Ruins National Monument and at the Flagstaff Area National Monuments. He has worked for Mesa Verde for the last 10 years. His primary niche on the Mesa Verde Cultural Resource Team is the management of the park's archaeological GIS data, which he will discuss in detail during this presentation. We'll be happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. If you could kindly hold them, that would be most appreciated. And now I'd like to welcome Sheldon.
Thank you, Monica. Good afternoon, everybody.
Well, hi, Sheldon. So that's a beautiful fall scene behind you.
Oh yeah, thank you. I just took that a couple of weeks ago. Those colors have unfortunately faded, but they're still a little bit there. That was in Crater Canyon.
Well, it's beautiful. Now, is that on the approach to the park as you're driving in?
Yes, right out off of after Montezuma Overlook.
Oh, well, wonderful. It's nice to see fall colors. I'm from Connecticut, so even though Sedona gets that change of season, I miss fall foliage. So thank you for sharing. So Sheldon, why don't you just get started with the presentation? That's what we're all here for.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully everything will go right. That one. Okay. So as I have been introduced, I'm Sheldon Baker. I'm a compliance archaeologist and GIS specialist here at Mesa Verde National Park. I'm not for the whole park, but for the cultural resource program, I'm the GIS specialist. So let me move on here. So, okay, I mentioned myself as a compliance archaeologist, and so we're going to get into what that means here in a moment. But of course, what do archaeologists do at Mesa Verde National Park and why? You know, when you tell somebody you're an archaeologist, immediately they're always like, you know, if they don't know much about archaeology, they're assuming that you're digging, right? Oh, what are you going to go dig, you know, and things like that. Do we excavate sites? Yes, sometimes, but very rarely do we excavate at Mesa Verde. And of course, it's not about finding neat artifacts. It's about, you know, archaeologists excavate sites to gather data. And every archaeologist probably has a professor who tells them that it's not what you find, it's what you find out. So what I'm going to be talking to you today is the type of archaeology we do here at Mesa Verde is archaeological survey. And that basically means we locate and document archaeological sites on the landscape. Doing that, usually we line up in a regular spacing of maybe about 5 or 6 archaeologists and spaced out about 5 to 10 feet apart. And we basically systematically walk along over the landscape, noting where artifacts and archaeological features are. And then we return to those locations and document those sites thoroughly. Fortunately, it's the nature of the archaeological record here at Mesa Verde that we can find a lot on the surface. There's an amazing amount of architectural features and artifacts on the surface. And so that's what I'll be telling you about today. Also, so, you know, there's research-oriented archaeology where, you know, usually it's a professor or a graduate student can kind of define the nature of their project or their research question. They go and do either excavate a site or even do archaeological survey. And or there's on the other hand, there's applied archaeology, and that's where compliance archaeology comes in. Our work is primarily directed to fill the requirements of the Section 106 of the National Preservation Act, which I will explain to you here in a bit. So moving on. So also this presentation is about GIS, or Geographic Information Systems. GIS is basically a computer system of software and data for storing, analyzing, and displaying geographic data. You can make maps. Also, another component of it, the spatial data is usually points, lines, or polygons, and it's linked to an attribute table of quantitative and qualitative data. So, for example, some of that in the attribute table may be the site size in square meters of an archaeological site, or it could be quantitative data, or that is quantitative data, like what is the, how close the site is to its nearest water source, or you could just have a chronological designation like a Pueblo 1 site. And I'll explain kind of our nomenclature as far as that is concerned. So that is my introduction here. So let me further introduce you to Mesa Verde. Anyway, so archaeological work at Mesa Verde, under what authority and why? The National Park Service, it was formed in 1916 under what's called the Organic Act, and that mandates that we conserve the scenery and natural resources, as well as historic objects, which would be archaeological resources. And also Mesa Verde National Park Defining Act of 1906 mandates that we prioritize the preservation of the ruins and natural resources as well in the park. So it's kind of a repeat of the organic. Actually, the defining act of Mesa Verde was before the formation of the Park Service as a complete federal institution. But so moving on, more specifically, Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, which was a law passed in 1966, really defines what we do here at Mesa Verde. And basically, Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act has to do with evaluating archaeological site significance and their effect a project will have on it. So a lot of times, of course, there will be road projects, water line projects, road expansion projects, which maybe you've heard about some of the things going on at Mesa Verde. All those things are going on, and I will be talking about some of these projects that we have to consider their effect on archaeological records more along in this presentation. There's also the National Environmental Policy Act and the ARPA are other laws that give us a mandate to conduct archaeological projects on National Park Service lands. And then also, of course, to conserve these archaeological resources, we need to know what they are and where they are located. And that's really part of also Section 110 of the National Historic Preservation Act to basically inventory and document the archaeological sites as well as historic buildings and other significant cultural resources. So that is the legal authority of what we do here at Mesa Verde National Park. So again, of course, Mesa Verde is known for its beautiful cliff dwellings here. I was going to do a laser pointer, of course, here. However, the park has over 4,800 documented archaeological sites, and we're always finding more. Only about 600 of those, or 12% of these, are alcove cliff dwelling sites. The rest of those archaeological sites are on the mesa tops. Basically, we have a chronology that begins with what's called Basket Maker 3, beginning at 500 AD and going on through to the Pueblo 3 period to about 1300 AD when the ancestral Puebloan people migrated south of here down to the Rio Grande Valley and other places, Hopi Reservation and a variety of other places. But additionally, there are many other types of historic archaeological sites related to the Euro-American exploration, like we have located and documented Nordenskjold, the Norwegian explorer who first came to Mesa Verde and is considered the first scientific researcher at Mesa Verde, as well as there used to be homesteads within Mesa Verde, as well as also civilian and civilian conservation corps labor. So a lot of Navajo sites, sweat lodges, for example, are found in close proximity to some of the original roads that were coming into Mesa Verde. So, and also park tourism. We have now archaeological sites in the park that are related to park tourism. So yeah, and I just want to kind of point out on this map, this is a GIS map, and it's the point data for all these archaeological sites are linked to an attribute table. And in that attribute table, I have queried the software to basically show you the kind of the distribution of archaeological sites according to chronological periods. So for example, you can see over in this part of the eastern side of the park, there's a lot of what would be Pueblo II habitation sites, where on the other hand, you can see more of a concentration of Pueblo III, most likely alcove sites here on those canyon rims. So GIS gives us a way to analyze the distribution of archaeological sites across the park and as well as in time and space. Another word about, so also something important to note is most of the earlier sites are located on the mesa tops, starting with Basket Maker 3. And the earlier the archaeological site, the more subtle the material signature on the ground surface is. With Basket Maker 3, oftentimes it's only artifacts and some burned adobe. And the primary feature of those archaeological sites are buried pit houses. So they're a little more difficult to find. And so if you look at the distribution on here of Basket Maker 3 sites, which should be a blue dot here, they're pretty sparse. But there's probably more of them, and we haven't found them yet because they're just a more subtle signature on across the surface of the Mesa Verde National Park. So, okay, moving on. So systematic documentation of archaeological sites really began in the early 1950s with a man named Al Lancaster. He is a fairly famous figure in Southwestern archaeology. He actually didn't have much any education beyond a high school education, but he became an expert and he led some of the most famous and assisted some of the more academic oriented archaeologists in the Southwest. And he worked for Mesa Verde for quite a long time during his career and life. So him and a man named Arthur Rohn as well, and several other people, began a systematic survey of Chapin Mesa. Chapin Mesa is this, in the red here, this is the where most of you, if you've been to Mesa Verde, and I'm assuming a lot of people have been to Mesa Verde that are listening to this project, this is how you get to, Cliff Palace and Balcony House and the Mesa Top Loop and the headquarters area here. So just to orientate you. Then in the late 1950s, park management decided that they needed to expand opportunities for visitors. And so another large project began with the Weatherell Mesa project, and that's this green mesa over here. And that again is where a lot of people coming to Mesa Verde visit Longhouse and some of the other sites out there on Weatherell Mesa. So also University of Colorado Boulder, under the direction of several people, including David Bretternitz and some other names, I believe Lister was involved, also surveyed the rest of Mesa Verde National Park, and they located thousands and thousands of sites, but we are still finding more. So moving on here. So some of this early documentation of archaeological sites were very basic descriptions, short paragraphs like you see here on this documentation of probably a Pueblo I site, and a very rudimentary sketch map. Al Lancaster, I believe his name's on here probably somewhere. Yeah, Lancaster Naval up here on the top. They covered a lot of territory in about 3 years, and they documented 800 archaeological sites. So they were moving fairly quickly, but it was an incredible feat, and we're grateful for that initial documentation. It's because it's a great resource for what we're doing here when we're finding more sites and new sites. A lot of these sites were basically they were plotted on USGS topographic maps by hand. So you can see here that these are basically site numbers. Each site was given a number and a little dot, and that's how they kept track of the location of all these archaeological sites. And I do not envy them as a practitioner of GIS. That was it must have been laborious, and I'm glad we have modern computer technology. So, and I'm going to back up here for just a second because it seems like I skipped a slide, and I don't know how that happened. Yeah, I'm missing a slide. I defined GIS, or maybe I just forgot that I mentioned it. Anyway, we'll be talking about Geographic Information Systems a little later here. So beginning in the 1990s, 1996 with Chapin 5, a series of catastrophic wildfires came to Mesa Verde. Chapin 5 occurred in 1996. You can see it here in the central part of the park. And then there was what's called the Bircher fire over here on the east, as well as it's kind of lumped in with the Pony fire, which it was the same year. And that was over here in the southwest section of the park on Weathero Mesa. And then, of course, Long Mesa 2002 fire, which was misnamed. It's actually on Chapin Mesa, and this is Long Mesa, but that was probably because they named the fire from Park Point up here. And so it was just a kind of a little error. So it really should have been Chapin 6 fire. But anyway, so as part of these fires, archaeologists had the opportunity to survey and re-record sites more systematically and in greater detail. I remember these sites coming into the news and you hearing about them finding all these new sites. I was in graduate school in the University of Pittsburgh way back then. And I remember that specifically, that the news about these fires. So let me see about getting bear with me, my mouse is kind of acting weird. So yes, starting with the Chapin 5 and Bircher Pony and Long Mesa fires, it was an opportunity to document sites in greater detail. Beginning with that, we started mapping, or my predecessors started mapping these sites in greater detail with graphically improved sketch maps. We would basically take a tape and compass out into the field, and these maps would be hand drawn. And Monica actually asked me, so what do these archaeological sites look like? And so I added this site over here, a picture of a site that was part of a recent fire, and we did a post-fire survey last year on Moorfield Ridge Fire is what it was called. And so you could see that this is, I'm just guessing this is a Pueblo II site, just by it's kind of the signature. It's a mound of collapsed masonry, basically, and there's artifacts probably all over this area. You can actually see another mounded site back here. So that's basically what archaeological sites look like here at Mesa Verde that have not been excavated. So another part of we started a computer database of all our archaeological sites. So this is a view of how that has evolved. It's a kind of a web-based interface, and we basically enter data into this, and then we can export and query tables from this database. And okay, so moving on. Okay, okay, yeah, here we are. This is just giving you another picture of how these archaeological sites look on the surface. Right here, this is actually a fairly prominent kind of a rubble mound. I'm guessing this is probably a Pueblo II site on the mesa top, and you can see the stacked masonry that's been collapsed. This probably looks a little bit more subtle here, but this is probably also a Pueblo II, or actually I believe it's a Pueblo I and Pueblo II habitation site. And even more subtle here is just a slab-lined room that we've located on the surface. And of course, we find artifacts, pottery on the surface, flaked stone tools on the surface, and the debris from that process. And this is a metate, just to kind of give you an idea of what we're looking at when we walk across on the surface and document these archaeological sites and turn them into data and maps. So also with the Chapin 5, we began to locate and record the location of these archaeological sites with GPS, or what's known as global positioning systems. And then we also began to display these site locations in GIS software, but only at that point were we locating these sites as points in the GIS software. So as I mentioned, we would do those sketch maps, and we were not until recently were we really documenting all these sites as with their spatial boundaries. But we can bring in some of these sketch maps, and if they're well done and we've got a good datum point, we can go ahead and georeference those sketch maps. We scan them and we bring them into the GIS software, and we can actually draw the boundaries of these archaeological sites. And so that's what you're seeing here is my subsequent efforts to bring all this spatial data, archaeological sites, into the GIS, Geographic Information Systems. So this map gives you another idea of the kind of the complexity that we could be documenting here. This was part of the Cliff Palace, the Cliff Palace Loop survey that we did in anticipation of the road work that's going on right now here at Mesa Verde National Park, or at least in the last part of the summer. So a lot of these are rubble scatters. Some of them are depressions that are probably pit houses and rooms, and middens, which is basically a German word that we archaeologists use for a refuse mound or pile. And then this is just kind of a view of when we first started doing this, not first started, but when we began taking at the first part of this project, we were collecting this data as shape files, and they each had these folders here, and then these individual kind of features and things like that. That digital features, points, lines, or polygons. So we're trying to improve our efficiency, and so we began developing what's called a geodatabase here. And let me get my mouse to let me go and move on to the next slide. There we go. So this is kind of a picture of more of like all of our data right here is integrated into fewer individual files, and they're collected into what's called a geodatabase. And these are just some of the kind of classifications we use in the field to record these the spatial data for archaeological sites. And so also changes in technology have led to improvements in our field data collection. Of course, most people are familiar with GPS, global positioning systems. There's people that have recreational models that they use to go hiking and geocaching and things like that. Well, now we have what's called GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite Systems. This is, they began putting these receivers on the market that not only get the GPS satellite array, the signals from that, but they also receive satellite locational data from the European Union Galileo system, the GLONASS system that's operated by the Russian Federation, and BeiDou satellite system operated by China. And so more satellites spread across the sky in a better pattern will give us better, more accurate data when we are recording these archaeological sites. And so those are kind of new technology. And okay. So instead of sketch maps, now we have better tools to collect data that export directly into our geodatabase to map archaeological sites. This is just showing you, these are my colleagues here using our new data collection system. Instead of this Trimble that we began the road survey with, we graduated and created this geodatabase, and we are now using what's called a program called Collector that's on these Samsung tablets. And so this is actually a screenshot of the tablet, and we can actually better see what we're mapping in real time as we go ahead and document these archaeological sites. And yeah, and this is just another kind of screenshot of our work here, and I'm going to be telling you about this project shortly that this mapping was part of. So again, we map with this program, and then we bring it into a GIS data, and these are the kind of the artifact types that have basically gone into the GIS, and we can display them in the documentation of this archaeological site here as part of the Wildland Fire Center project that I'll be telling you about shortly. So again, I showed you early on with the beginning with Lancaster's efforts at documenting archaeological sites. They basically just typed up, well, they first wrote out notes and put them on, little like 3x5 or 5x5 inch site cards. Okay, so starting with those post-fire surveys I was telling you about, we began with much more detailed data collection, and this is just one page out of a 6-page form packet that we have been using here at Mesa Verde National Park. And then this form packet would go and be entered manually into our archaeological site database. However, now, hopefully next year, with our new compliance surveys, we will be using another program that will take all this tabular data and put it into, we'll collect this data and record it in our tablets, and then sync that data up to our database so that we don't have to manually enter this data. So this is some of the things we're trying to do to improve our efficiency and get more work done and document more archaeological sites in Mesa Verde. So anyway, so that's kind of concludes partly the kind of the technology and what we're doing that is new and better here at Mesa Verde National Park. But so anyway, so some of our recent archaeological work for compliance with the National Historic Preservation Act is related to the 3R: resurfacing, restoration, and rehabilitation of the Mesa Top and Cliff Palace Loop roads. So these are the roads. So if you've been to Mesa Verde, surely you've probably driven along this road and visited some of these. This is where you'd come across the first Basket Maker 3 site for display, and then Square Tower House, and these sites that are display here in for public use. So we basically did a survey of this area, both of these loop roads, in anticipation of this road construction. Cars and motorized vehicles and RVs have gotten larger since these roads were first built and constructed. So some of our roads here needed to be expanded. Plus, there is, I believe it's in the process of final decision of possibly keeping a bike lane over here. So these on the Mesa Top Loop. So these sites, these roads needed to be expanded and resurfaced, and that is what is going on now at Mesa Verde National Park. So we did these surveys in 2017 through 2018, and actually some of that work went on into 2019 as well. And so it's kind of important that, you know, the Federal Highways Administration, which manages our road construction, because they're going to expand the road prism, they, you know, we needed better data on the spatial extent of these archaeological sites. And so that's why site area polygons putting that into GIS became very important data to have, so we could actually understand how that road work might impact some of those archaeological sites that are right off to the side of the road. So anyway, so last year we've been working on a new project, and so basically we have a problem. Let me catch up with my notes here briefly here. So as you've probably already read this, so I don't know how much I have to explain. So, but our Wildland Fire and Fuel Management Division in the park, their engines are located in basically historic structures right now. They're not very well protected. This creates a problem because they're open to weathering, and this is expensive equipment. And so we need some better storage facilities, as well as our Mesa Verde Helitack crew and helicopter is actually based about 25 miles to the east at Fort Lewis, just south of Hesperus, if you're familiar with the geography of the region. So basically our Helitack wildland firefighters are not at Mesa Verde, and it would be better to have a helipad for them, as well as facilities for the pilots. It's a legal mandate that these helicopter pilots have to have a lounge. Basically, it's not a fancy lounge, but it's a place where they can rest and maybe get some shut-eye in case they have to take off on their helicopter on short notice to respond to wildfires in the region. So there are relatively few locations to put these facilities that are proposed. So we've got actually 3 possible locations here. I know I only have arrows to 2 possible locations. It's because there's actually 3 locations, and one of the location here on Chapin Mesa. So moving on here, so that's a problem, our compliance problem. So we had to do a couple of surveys of these areas, and this is what we refer to as the Henneman Property. It's a property that's going to be obtained by Mesa Verde. It's been deeded to the park, and so we did a survey of this area, and as you can see, these are in the purple polygons here. We did document some archaeological sites on that parcel, that area. And so, you know, what does that mean for preservation efforts, or if even the cost, if we should have to excavate those sites to preserve the data if we really had to build something there. So this is part of the compliance process that we have to do, is we have to document what's there. There does look like there's more space there to potentially build these facilities for wildland fire management. So our next area on Chapin Mesa is 2 proposed areas, what we call the Quarry area here, as well as the Chapin water tank area. One of these areas is really the preferred location. The present wildland fire facilities are just right south of here on just right outside of the map area. The Quarry area is a possible location, but one of the problems that's already been discussed for putting these facilities here is they would need to put more new water lines and electrical lines and things going out here, and that would increase the cost of the project, the construction project. Over here on the third proposed possible area for these facilities is this Chapin water tank area. Yes, there's a water tank there. It's actually, as we speak, presently being dismantled. They've put a new water tank that's smaller. They don't really need this large water tank. And so it's actually a historic resource itself, but we've gone through the compliance process and determined that it's not eligible, so that we could dismantle that and put in a new, smaller, improved infrastructure, a water tank here in this location. And so there's electricity and obviously water infrastructure out here. And so right where this old water tank that will be dismantled is located is another location for the proposed wildland fire facilities. So we have to, this is our survey area. We had to survey this area. So this is our result. Basically, we documented all these archaeological sites. This ends up being pretty much a pretty extensive Pueblo I village. And again, it's fairly subtle archaeology, but you know, we were able to identify this, these features and artifact concentrations, and we mapped these archaeological sites. And then one of those last maps that I showed you is basically one of these archaeological sites. I believe this one up here of the sites, the last one of the site maps I showed you. So anyway, this was the result of our survey. So going on to the next slide. Okay, so what we have here is the footprints of the possible footprints of these wildland fire facilities right here on the Quarry area side, as well as on where the old water tank that's being dismantled is located. And then they don't need all these. These are possible locations for these helipads, and of course, the helipad would need a road out to it to take gear and things like that. So one of these possible helipads would be part of this facility. Not all of them, but we need to, identify which possible locations we could put a helipad in. So as you could see, and then we also, using GIS software, we can basically do a buffer around the proposed facility footprint. And because, of course, if you do construction in an area, even though you've got maybe a relatively narrow footprint, there's going to be an area of potential effect when construction's going on that could impact the ground surface, and there's still going to be some excavation of these areas. And so you've got a blue buffer that's basically kind of the possible area of potential effect. So we have to consider how this project's going to affect archaeological sites. And as you see that it's pretty crowded in there. And so it may be difficult to put these facilities in these locations. This is where maybe potentially archaeologists would excavate here at Mesa Verde. That would be what we call data recovery. And to mitigate the damage, potential damage to these archaeological sites, we would have to excavate all or part of them to mitigate the damage that the construction activities would inflict on these cultural resources. So, but of course that's expensive, and it's all this is still in the decision-making process. So I can't tell you what the outcome is, but this kind of points in the direction of probably down there near the entrance is where this project would be constructed. So I don't know if I've gone too fast here, but that is primarily what I have to share with you today about archaeological work and its relationship to the National Historic Preservation Act and compliance process. And this is a very nice projectile point we found. I thought it would be nice eye candy to show you. And so that'll be it. Thank you. Or I'll entertain questions.
Well, thank you so much, Sheldon. I have a new appreciation for data logging, GPS location. It's so interesting in this context of archaeology and exactly the extent of what happens at the park. I think if anyone has been following Mesa Verde this past spring, summer with the road construction, one doesn't necessarily first think of, okay, archaeological sites that are in a perimeter of the possible road construction. And even if they're several feet away, how will it be impacted? So there's just so much that goes into this. So thank you.
Yeah.
And as we said, we're going to open it up to questions or comments. So just type something in the chat box and we'd be happy to get that answered. Sure, we have a question from Andre. The maps show many sites located near the edges of the park. Do you ever survey sites which lie outside of the park boundary? And how is that data managed?
Well, most of those areas outside of the park are on Mountain Ute Reservation, and they have an archaeologist that works for them, as well as oftentimes they'll use a private cultural resource management contractor. So usually, no, we do not do much with those areas. That is in the domain of the Mountain Ute tribe.
Good question. Well, in the meantime, while something else comes up, with the improvements in technology always seemingly to be out every year, How does the park integrate new technology into your work?
Well, let me think about that. Basically, we're just trying to keep caught up. There's always new improvements. Yeah, it's just trying to keep up with the software and the various new tools that we can use. Sometimes, like there are things like LiDAR data and LiDAR collection data for documenting alcove sites is, things that are presently out of park budgets, but would be phenomenal tools to use to more fully document a lot of the alcove sites in the park, which would be tremendous. So yeah, it's always it's a constant battle to keep caught up, I guess is what I can tell you.
Sure. Well, we have a question from Bob Scott. I've seen stories of laser mapping of rooms, etc., in the cliff dwelling to create 3D models. Are you involved with that, and what is progress?
Well, yes, we did. We've had a little assistance with that. I'm not directly involved with that. I've been on the sidelines of that. At some point, maybe in the future, we could get a LiDAR scanner and do a lot more of that. Would be good. I mean, there's so many archaeological sites here where we're never going to be fully documented here, but yeah, that would be a interesting work to be done in the future.
We have a question from a colleague of mine here at the Verde Valley Archaeology Center, Rob Elliott. He is one of the center's conservancy site stewards. So Rob asks, do you use any kind of drone technology in your work? 3D LiDAR, as mentioned before.
Yes, well, we do have some researchers in the park that have used some of the drone technology. Donna Glowacki and her graduate student Sean Field were successful in getting a proposal together to do photogrammetry and fly photogrammetry, drone equipped photogrammetry over the Farview area. And again, that a lot of that takes money and training. The rules for flying drones in the national park, it's illegal, by the way, if you come in as a private citizen and want to fly your drone, FYI. I want to warn you before that. And so it's using drones. It takes a long process to get those approved, because generally, unless there's some reason for research, it's not permitted yet. So, and it's not permitted for private citizens to come and fly their drones either. So hopefully in the future, we are looking forward to doing some of that. So yes, it will probably be, in the future, in Mesa Verde's future for cultural resource management.
Great. And we have a comment from one of our fellows, Mesa Verde Foundation fellows, Todd Bacon, says, thank you for explaining a complex subject in terms that laymen can understand and illustrating them with real park sites. I ditto that. Also, we have a question from Scott Cadera. Are there current excavations going on now? What do they hope to find? What happens to the artifacts?
Well, okay, as related to our 3R project on the Mesa Top Loop, we did identify some sites that were potentially impacted by the road construction on the Mesa Top Loop. And so we did some limited testing. One of my colleagues, Kay Barnett, was in charge, as well as Chris McAllister, had already given a webinar here, and Joel Gamache. Did do some test excavations, very limited. We did find a very deeply buried pit house floor that basically will not be impacted because the road will be, you know, the road work will take care of it. So we excavated some of that pit house. We collected the artifacts. It will go into curation. It was the limited excavations were mapped, photographed, thoroughly documented as best we could. And so, yeah, excavations are generally limited here in Mesa Verde National Park. It's all about preservation. Excavation, it can be basically it's a damaging, destructive process when you excavate an archaeological site. So Mesa Verde, the management plan in general is to not excavate archaeological sites, unless there's a good reason to.
Very good. We'll just give it a minute or so for any last minute questions or comments. Otherwise, my question to you, Sheldon, is which season typically are you out in the field working, or you're out there year round?
Usually in the spring up until right now, when it starts getting cold and snowy, and you cannot see much of anything once the Mesa Verde ground surface gets covered with snow. So we usually got a lot of work to do with data management and report writing and things like that. So it's basically as soon as the snow's gone in the spring until the snow flies again in the fall is our field season.
Great. Well, we have a fun question, a follow-up question from our fellow Todd Bacon. He quotes, "Loaded question. Do you view Norden Skuld as a hero or a villain?"
Oh boy.
I
don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be in trouble or not. Well, you know.
Answer it however you like, Sheldon.
He did take Mesa Verde artifacts out of the country, and that would be without a permit or a proper permit back then, and that would be illegal now. But he did do some phenomenal work. You can get a book that he wrote. So, you know, hero and villain, you know, yin and yang, nobody's good and nobody's totally bad, right? So.
Okay, well, that just wraps it up. And I would like to thank everyone for tuning in and also for your patience. We were supposed to have this webinar a couple of weeks ago, but we're just grateful that you're here supporting and look forward to seeing you in a few weeks' time.
All right.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, Sheldon, and thank you, Monica.
Thank you.